"No more have I," said Tom to himself, when he read the note, and the next morning he had deposited himself on the box seat of the Trotbury coach. "Just come to see how you are getting on in this part of the world," was his first salutation to John, as he landed himself unexpectedly at the gate of Tincroft House, on the afternoon of the same day. John was very pleased to see the son of his old friend, and he told him so. "And as to the inconvenience of accommodating an unexpected guest," quoth Mrs. Tincroft, when young Tom apologized for the abruptness of his invasion, as he called it, she hoped Tincroft House was big enough to accommodate a dozen such as Tom, if need were. And so he might set his mind at rest on that subject. And Tom did set his mind at rest. In fact, he found his quarters so much to his liking, that he lengthened his visit from day to day, under a variety of pretenses, until he had been more than a fortnight an inmate of the pleasant mansion. "You must stay with us over next week now," said Sarah, one evening when Tom was seriously propounding the propriety of returning to business. "It is Trotbury cricket week, and we shall want a gentleman to take us onto the ground 2 or 3 of the days at least, and John doesn't like cricket at all, do you, John?" John didn't like cricket, and he said so. He had had enough of cricket in his younger days, and what pleasure there could be in standing up before 3 sticks stuck into the ground to knock away a ball, with the chance of being maimed for life, he couldn't for a moment conceive. But for all that, if his dear Sarah had any pleasure in seeing what was called the noble game played, or if he could be of any use to the young ladies in procuring them good positions for viewing the noble game, he was very much at their service. So, if Tom must really return, or felt called upon by the imperative claims of business to return to London, he himself would not interpose an obstacle in the shape of Trotbury Cricket Week. Indeed, he wasn't quite sure that it wouldn't be as well for Tom to remember that there were claims upon him elsewhere. What, for instance, would the young lady at Camberwell think when she heard, if she should hear, of Tom's being seen on Trotbury cricket ground with another young lady? John asked, gravely. Whereupon, Tom declared that the young lady at Camberwell might think as she pleased. He hoped he wasn't tied to any young lady's apron strings, there would be time enough for that when another knot was tied. Tom shifted rather uneasily in his chair as he said this, and, though he did feign to laugh, he looked a little redder than usual, especially when he saw that his host's gravity was not at all moved by his gaiety. Perhaps it was to prove how much at liberty he felt himself, that, later in the day, Tom left his host and hostess and his sister in the drawing-room, and strolled into the pretty flower garden already described, where Helen was employing herself as he very well knew in tending her plants. By the way, there is no feminine occupation more adapted to innocent flirtation, if such a composite term, or rather, contradiction in terms, may be used, than in this kind of gardening. The sweet, enthralling tyranny displayed by the head gardeneress in ordering her enchanted slave, who for the nonce is made to be a hewer of wood, with his pocket knife in preparing flower sticks, and a drawer of water, in filling the watering pot any number of times from the nearest pump, well, or pond, is something quite instructive to witness, for it points back to Eden, evidently, and delightful to endure. Tom at least thought so, as he found himself, his offered services accepted, making himself of some use, as she said, to the fair Helen. For by this time a kind of understanding seemed to have been tacitly entered into that Master Tom, being already on the high road to matrimony, and within sight, so to speak, of the goal, was to consider Miss Wilson as a sort of twin sister to his own sister Catherine, and to be treated with frank unreserve accordingly, for, what was Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba? I am afraid, too, that dear old John Tincroft had by this time, if the truth were known, rather spoiled darling Helen, by making her see and believe how happy it made him to be her humble servant, and perhaps she might have thought that every gentleman she fell in with was like John. But this by the way. There, that will do for all the watering we want tonight, said the lady, looking round with admiration on her revived flowers. And now please help me tie up this straggler, Tom. In another moment Tom was on one knee, for the convenience of the operation, and the young lady's slender fingers were deftly fastening the string which was to confine the flower stalks to their supporting stick, when a hand, not Helen's, was laid on Tom's shoulder. Very pleasantly employed, Tom, said Tincroft, quietly, for he was the intruder. Tom started to his feet. Don't hurry, said John, but when Miss Wilson has quite done with your services, I want a word or two. The young lady graciously gave Tom permission to retire, and the two gentlemen walked slowly down the path together without speaking until they had reached the farther end. Then John wheeled round, as also did Tom, and stood looking from the distance towards the fair gardeneress, who was now, as it seemed, occupied in gathering a nosegay. Tom, don't you think it would be better for you to return home tomorrow, said Tincroft, after a rather awkward pause. Master Tom looked his elderly friend in the face, with some surprise, as well he might, perhaps, for John Tincroft was not usually anxious to get rid of his guests. Do you think so, sir? The young fellow asked. I'll tell you presently what I think, said John, and also why I think it, if I do think it. You may be sure of one thing, at any rate I shall be very sorry to lose your good company. Thank you, Mr. Tincroft. You are very kind, said young Tom. You would like to stay over next week, it being the grand cricket week, continued John. Yes, I should, replied Tom, bluntly. No doubt, and not only because of its being the cricket week. Tom again looked up into his friend's face, with a quick gesture, not altogether of surprise, and then he turned rather red in the face, I think, and looked down upon the path. There was a broken twig upon it, which engrossed his attention, perhaps, for he took great pains to turn it over with his foot, so as to pass it under a kind of general examination. He didn't speak. Until now the two gentlemen had remained, as it seemed, rooted to the spot, and the fair Helen was still employed in filling her little flower basket. This completed, she turned from the border and disappeared. Apparently this broke the spell, for Tincroft now slipped his arm within that of his young friend, and the two paced up and down the long path as they communed together. My dear lad, said John, when they were thus in motion, your father and I were dear friends when we were about your age. We were almost always together when we were at Oxford. We never had a serious disagreement in our lives, I received many a kindness from him, and though we have not seen so much of each other of late years as formerly, we are as much friends as ever. Don't you believe this? Tom did believe this. His father always spoke in the warmest terms of affection of his old friend Tincroft, he said. And if I should say anything to you that seems to go a little against the grain, Tom, you won't be more offended than you can help, will you? Because you may be sure I don't mean anything really unkind to the son of so old and dear a friend as your father is. No, Tom wouldn't be offended. I know, continued John, that some persons do sometimes make great mistakes, which lead them into great impertinences and create a great deal of confusion and mischief as well. I remember a case in point, where a man who in the early part of his life had gone very far astray in vicious pursuits, became in his later years, when broken down in health, the most uncharitable censor of the supposed failings of his friends and acquaintances that I ever had the unhappiness of knowing. And on one occasion, he fell foul of the character of a friend who, in those old times, had rescued him from disgrace and ruin, and quarrelled with this benefactor by charging with folly which had not the slightest foundation in fact. I hope, Tom, you won't think that I am one of that sort. No, Tom was sure that his father's old friend was not. And yet, as we grow older, John went on, we sometimes see, or fancy, it may be altogether an error on our part, but we fancy, we see things more clearly than at an earlier period of our lives. And especially the blunders we ourselves have at some former time committed, make us think that we are wiser than others, wiser perhaps than we really are, and more competent to set another right when we think him to be in danger. They went on slowly pacing the path from one end to the other before another word was spoken. Then John resumed his talk. The person of whom I was speaking a few moments ago, having been guilty of bad actions as well as of criminal thoughts and desires, was too ready to attribute bad motives to another, who was utterly astounded when he heard of the charge brought against him. And perhaps, dear Tom, you will be astounded too when you hear further what I wish to say. When I was a young fellow like you, your father knows all about it, I was guilty of folly, I thank God not of deliberate sin, nor perhaps of any sin at all, only as far as there is a degree of sin in most folly. Well, I was foolish. Without intending it, I did that which was the means of completely changing the entire course of many lives and histories. In the merciful arrangements of divine providence, those changes were, as I hope, overruled for good. But I would never forget that, whether for good or evil, the folly was the same, nor that, overruled as they may have been, they produced at the time, and for a long time afterwards, much unhappiness to all within their influence. Now, my dear lad, without intending it, I know what you are going to say, at least, I think I do, sir, said Tom, in a sorrowful tone, and it is all quite true. Please don't go on if it is about Helen, I mean, Miss Wilson. John Tincroft smiled, but rather sadly. Poor Tom, he sighed rather than uttered, and then there was silence during the next slow-paced journey down the path. It was for young Tom now to begin again, and he was not sorry, perhaps, that the shades of evening were gathering around, so that his countenance was at least obscured. I have been very foolish this last week or two, but I haven't meant any harm, Tom humbly confessed. I ought to have remembered that I am not free, and never have been, said the young fellow, gulping down with a strong effort, as it seemed, something that half choked him. Now, do you think it quite fair, Mr. Tincroft, to have everything cut and dried for a young fellow when he first sets his foot in the world? That's a wide question, Tom. Well, you know what I mean. There was my going into business instead of going to Oxford, you know. That has turned out very well, Tom. You yourself have said you are glad you didn't have your way in that. And I don't know, but I fancy fathers, wise fathers, of course, are better judges of what to make of their sons than the sons can be, as to what to make of themselves. Yes, that's all right, but about who they are to marry when they grow up. Not but what I might have chosen Blanche for myself, if I had been left to make a choice, but I wasn't, you see. But you are engaged to your cousin, you know, Tom, and with your own consent. Isn't it so? Yes, but then I hadn't seen anybody else I ever thought I should care about, or think about, groaned young Tom. And this leads us back to where we started from, my dear Tom, said John, kindly. I think it will be better for you not to stay here over the cricket week, but to return to your home and your Blanche tomorrow. For she is your Blanche, you know. I suppose it will be best, sighed Tom, lugubriously. And be sure of this, Tom, that what is the right thing to do is the happiest to be done when it is done. I have fancied how it may have been with you the last few days, and, to tell the truth, I have had a fancy of what might be any time within the last year or two. And so I have striven to keep you and Helen apart, not because I don't love you, Tom, nor because I should not, under other circumstances, have liked you to be Helen's lover, but because you could not be that without dishonor to yourself. But that was only my folly, perhaps, and, anyhow, you are not deeply wounded yet, and there's no harm done yet, either with or without intending it. In a fortnight's time you will have forgotten, or learned to smile at a few little passages like that of this evening, which I have had my eye and thoughts upon since you have been here. And when the time comes, if you are honest and loyal to yourself, as I feel sure you will be thankful to me, I think, for having given you a momentary pain, perhaps. And now let us go into the ladies. Chapter XXXIII. More panics than one. Young Tom followed his friend's advice, which, indeed, he could not very well help doing, but it went against the grain, as John had feared it might. And I am afraid our old friend Tincroft did not get many thanks from Tom's sister, nor from Helen, nor perhaps even from his own dear Sarah, for the summary dismissal of the faithful squire upon whose services they had calculated during the following week. This was not of so much consequence, however, and, as John had predicted, Tom had not been home a week before he had forgotten, no, not forgotten, but had determined to root out from his heart, if possible, the seedling affection which had dared to spring up in that flower bed of nature. Young Tom had soon other matters to think about, and so had our old friend Grigson, his father, so also had the MP at the head of the city firm, as well as every other member of it. Every now and then, say once in 10 years or thereabouts, there comes what is known as a crisis, or a panic, or a turning point, in commercial affairs in the city and elsewhere, in which crisis or panic, huge fortunes are dispersed, the best hands are in danger of being bowled out or stumped out at the golden wicket of trade, and all credit seems for the time to come at an end. Such a state of things came about when young Tom had nearly arrived at his 21st birthday, and though the great firm in which he was to be a junior partner, consequent on his fast approaching marriage with his cousin, rode out the storm, it was for a time in a more crippled state than those concerned would have cared to acknowledge. Many months, indeed, transpired before they could look around them with a comfortably complacent sense of security, and of thankfulness for their escape. Of course, during this critical period, all thoughts of marrying and giving in marriage were set aside and deferred to a more convenient season. Nevertheless, young Tom remained faithful to his engagement, and even believed that, when the propitious time should arrive, he should be sufficiently happy with his Blanche, who, to do her justice, was not deficient in attractive charms, either of person or of mind. As to very ardent love as love is understood by romantic young ladies and gentlemen, this had never been professed on either side, but as a marriage of convenience, well, there are worse transactions of that sort perpetrated every day than that which had been so long designed between these two cousins. At length, however, serious preparations were being entered upon for the consummation of this great event in their history, when advice reached the young lady's father that his father, the magnate of Mumbleton, and the autocrat of the Mumbles, was suddenly taken ill, and was, as was supposed, on his dying bed. This supposition soon ripened into reality. Old Mr. Elliston, who was in the habit of boasting that he had never had a day's illness in his life of manhood, had now, at 80 years old, to submit to the great and universal decree, dust thou art, and to dust shalt thou return. He died. He didn't approve of it, but, in this grave business of life, as it has been called, he was overruled, and compelled to yield. He died. Great changes then took place both at the Mumbles and in London. The son inherited the father's property, which, though not so large as it had been thought to be, and which had suffered in the late commercial panic, was yet a pleasant enough estate to enter upon. And the son, who had all his life been anticipating this possession, entered upon it as his right, and with a sort of feeling, it was said, that if he had had his rights, according to the strict and literal rendering of Scripture, he would have been master of the Mumbles 10 years earlier. Be this as it may, the removal of this gentleman from London to his paternal estate and mansion was not only attended with the breaking up of his establishment at Camberwell, but was also soon followed by his withdrawal from the firm in which he had so long been a partner. Probably this determination on his part was hastened by disgust at trade in general, consequent upon his recent experiences in business fluctuations. At all events, he was determined, as he said, to wipe his hands of it. Which he did, and he did not go out empty-handed either, for he withdrew not only himself, but the full share of capital to which he was entitled. Thenceforth, therefore, he entered upon the life of a country gentleman. Other events followed. The first was the flight from the old home of the single Miss Elliston, who had so long kept her father's house on a rather scanty annuity. She had never been a very great favourite of her brother, nevertheless, he would have given her house room, he said, but being offered, not only house room, but a home in her brother-in-law's and her sister's pleasant villa on the banks of the Thames, she accepted the offer, and was no more known in Mumbleton. Then there were other changes. Old servants were dismissed and new ones were hired, old furniture was sold and new was bought, old and stale pictures were taken down from the walls, and fresh were hung up. In all this, the new proprietor only acted on the universal instinct by which the world moves on to the universal termination, when it, and all that it inherit, shall be dissolved, and like the baseless fabric of a vision, leave not a rack behind. There were yet other events to follow. When the brief ceremonial term of mourning for the dead was ended, the doors of the family mansion at the Mumbles were opened wide for the reception of guests. There were grand doings then, I promise you, reader. But as I was not among the invited ones, I decline giving a second-hand report of them. If you want to know more, look into the county paper of that date, and gratify your natural longing. No, I was not among the invited, and, strange to say, neither was young Tom Grigson, in whom I hope you, dear reader, take enough interest, though so recently introduced to him, to be anxious to hear what his sister has to say in the following letter. My darling Helen, thank you 100 times for your nice long letter. It is so good of you to remember me as you do, and to let me into all your little secrets. Ah, those were happy times when we were at school together, though it was school. For, as you say, Miss G was and is a very nice good lady, though she was, and is, a schoolmistress. And then we had one another's company, which was, I will say, the best thing that could have happened to me, whatever it might have been to you, and I do wish, dear, that you would come and spend a month, or 2 or 3 months, with me here, at my home. It is the only thing I find to object to in Mr. Tincroft, that as soon as you and London are mentioned in the same breath, but there, I am not to say anything about that, and I won't disobey orders. Thank you very much, and dear, good Mrs. Tincroft too, for wanting to see me again at your delightful home. I need not say how happy I shall be when the time comes, whenever it does come, and perhaps now our troubles are passing away, I mean Papa's business vexations, which you may have heard of, I shall not be so much wanted at home as I have been, at least, as they say I have been, for Papa says I have been of use, great use, he says, which I am glad of, I am sure. There, I won't write another word about myself. And, oh, I am so glad you wouldn't have that odious, you know I never did like him, that conceited dandy M. To think of his having the impudence to make you an offer. Dear Helen, I am sure, with all his money, and being a JP, as he likes to make known that he is, he would have made you miserable. Such a screw as he is, and not at all handsome either, though he does think so much of himself. Oh, darling, I am so glad you said no to him. I feel sure you will never repent it. There's something better in store for you than that would have been, I hope. And what do you think, Helen dear? You would never guess, so I'll tell you. You know all about Uncle Elliston's going to live at the Mumbles, and sidling up to be so grand there, and about Aunt Jane coming to live with us. And a very nice sort of aunt she is, and we all begin to like her very much, all the more for her having received not the best of treatment, so mamma thinks, from her brother. But this is not what I was going to tell you. Somebody else hasn't had the best treatment either. You know that dear Tom's wedding was put off because of old Mr. Elliston's death, and now it is put off altogether. Only think of that. We thought it strange, when they went to live at the Mumbles, that Tom wasn't asked there. And when they had that great housewarming, as it was called in the paper I sent you, it seemed more strange that not a word was said about Tom being wanted. But it is all explained now. He wasn't wanted, there was somebody else. And only yesterday came a letter to Papa. He won't let anybody read it but Mama, but he told us what was in it. The match is to be considered broken off for good, because Uncle Elliston doesn't approve of such family arrangements. Only think of that. And he, the first to propose the arrangement, so Papa says. And he thinks, Uncle does, that it will be better for all parties, and happier, to give it up. And then comes out what it all means. It means that Blanche has had an offer from Sir Somebody Something at Somewhere Park, who has been a pretty constant visitor at the Mumbles ever since they went to live there, and she has accepted him. I reckon if Uncle Richard hadn't married as he did, Uncle Elliston would have thought twice before he had let that Sir Somebody cut out poor Tom, for he hasn't a good character at all, Aunt Jane says. But now Uncle Richard has a son, and there is no chance of the estate coming to Tom, as was once calculated on, I think, and we all think. This made all the difference with Uncle Elliston. Anyhow, so it is, and I am glad that is. I am not sorry for it. At least, I hope it will all turn out for the best. But poor Tom is sadly cut up about it, and I wish, no, I won't say what I wish. P.S. What do you think? Oh, I am so glad. Papa and Mama have just told me that they will spare me for a good long holiday to go where and when I like. Can you suppose that I could like to go anywhere so well as to Tincroft House, to be with my darling Helen? May I say next week? Write and let me know. Of course, Helen's reply to Catherine was do come, and, of course, Catherine packed up and was soon at Tincroft House. She had been there about a month when came the following laconic epistle to Tom Griggs' son the younger. My dear Tom, some 2 or 3 summers ago you were rather disappointed in not having the opportunity of seeing what was to be seen at Trotbury during the celebrated cricket week. What there can be to see and delight in at that especial time is a mystery to me. But every one to his taste, and if you will honor me with your presence the week after next, being Trotbury cricket week, I shall be only too happy to give you all facilities for witnessing the sport, in good company. My dear Sarah says she knows you will come, and has given the housekeeper, our old Jane still holds that office, orders to have your room in readiness. Yours affectionately, John Tincroft. It was a gloriously fine week, the Trotbury cricket week, so said the Trotbury Weekly, and there was grand company on the Trotbury cricket ground every one of the days, especially on the grand day. All the elite of the neighborhood for miles round were there, according to the above-mentioned weekly. And if this report was almost too comprehensive and unlimited, I myself can bear witness, for was not I, the humble chronicler of these passages in real life, there also, that a more brilliant circle of fair ladies and gallant gentlemen, as they were seated on the green gross outside the bounds, eagerly watching the wonderful batting of the brothers G, the tremendous bowling of the champion of the North, and the superb fielding of the 211s in general throughout the day, or, as these same spectators walked about the privileged ground during the brief cessations of play while their magnificent and lovely equipages, Trotbury Weekly again, were drawn up on the broad sward behind, I say that a more brilliant circle, and so forth, can rarely be seen. A sober holiday it was and is, and I hope ever will be, as long as it lasts, and if old Oxford and Cambridge men, who knew once how to handle a bat, but have since had their innings and winnings in a higher sphere of toil and duty, chose, as they did and do choose, for once in a year to unbend and do honour to the good old English game of cricket, if John Tincroft will pardon my saying so, with their presence, and to throw over it a halo of protection, I respect and admire them all the more. For I also am, alas. No, but I have been a cricketer. And on that ground, on that especial day, there was not a pleasanter sight than a group of 3 ladies and 1 gentleman, who, retiring a little behind the crowd, made believe to be watching the game with wonderful interest, which they were not doing at all, and fancied they were deceiving all the world as to the true intent of their being there. Well, to tell the truth, Tom's wound was not so deep as to be mortal. He had been very loyal, as his friend Tincroft had exhorted him to be, to his elected spouse. He had tried very hard to love her very much, and if he had not quite succeeded, I honestly believe he would eventually have accomplished the feat. At any rate, he would have made his cousin Blanche a good husband, while there was nothing that could be alleged against him inconsistent with the bearing of a faithful and true-hearted fiancé. More than this, Tom had felt greatly pained by the heartless treatment to which he had been subjected, for, in addition to the letter already spoken of, he had himself received one from Blanche, in which she pleaded parental authority for breaking off her connection with her cousin, and, after begging that he would not disturb her peace of mind by attempting to change the decision she had come to, which would be useless, she concluded with best wishes for his future happiness. All this, I say, was very bitter to Tom, who hadn't deserved it. But he had philosophy to bear the blow with becoming fortitude, and it was when he had partly succeeded in getting the better of his mortification that he received the invitation to Tincroft House. To Tincroft House he went then, and was received with open arms by John and Sarah, to say nothing of his sister, who knew very well what she was about when, in pathetic and moving terms, she enlarged to Mrs. Tincroft, no one else being by, on the wrongs her poor brother had suffered. "Wouldn't it do him good to have a little holiday?" said pitiful Sarah. And thus it came to pass that, the former impediment being removed, Tom was pressed to visit Tincroft House during the Trotbury Cricket Week, as I have said. And so they made up their little party, leaving John to the solitude of his own study, and if there were other things besides the manly, noble game of cricket talked of as well. They looked very happy as I remember them, just as Sarah and Catherine came up to poor solitary me, and made me their excuse for staying behind, wanting a little chat, while Tom and Helen passed on, and did not so much as turn their faces towards your humble servant. "And you wanted a chat with me, did you? Oh, Mrs. Sarah Tincroft, Mrs. Sarah. And all this time, who cared for who was at the wicket, or how many runs had been made by the South, or how many by the North? Not Helen, or Tom either. At length, however, there was a great clapping of hands and much hurrahing, or hurraying, for the second innings was over, and the South had beaten the North. Young Tom went back from Tincroft House in a not very unhappy frame of mind, I think. True, there had been nothing said about love and all that trumpery, as I heard it called once. Trumpery, indeed. Well, nothing had been said about it, whatever you choose to call it. Tom wasn't going to be precipitate, and his disappointment was too recent, and besides, never having, from his cradle upwards, been a free man, he wanted a little time for trying what freedom was like. More than all, he must know something more about Helen, and she ought to know more about him, and a great deal more to the same purpose was conned over between Tom and his sister before his return. Nevertheless, Catherine knew, as well as you and I do, reader, what was coming. And so did dear Sarah know it, and I am very much mistaken if John did not give a guess at it without being told. At any rate, he witnessed more than one little episode in the flower garden with which he did not feel himself called upon to interfere. And in due time it all came to pass, so that the following summer, before the return match of North versus South was played in the Trotbury week, the veracious Weekly Chronicle informed its readers that at the parish church in the village of, near Trotbury, were united in the bonds of matrimony Thomas Grigson, Jr., of London, to Helen, daughter of the late Walter Wilson, of Boomerang, in Australia. And then in another part of the paper appeared a long description of the wedding, announcing, among other particulars, that Mr. John Tincroft, of Tincroft House, gave away the bride, whose beauty was the theme of admiration to all beholders. Also that two equally elegant and lovely sisters of the bridegroom officiated as bridesmaids, and that the ceremony over, and the wedding breakfast concluded, the happy pair drove off to catch the mail packet, which was to convey them to the continent, on their wedding tour. The End. Morrison and Gibb, Printers, Edinburgh. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. John Tincroft, Bachelor, and Benedict updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start, full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLOF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4 Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark. 1.e.5 Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark license. 1.e.6 You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee, or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7 Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8 You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works provided that, you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark works. 1.e.9 If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f.1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark. Project Gutenberg trademark is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah 841-16801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks. John Tincroft Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 Chapter V Chapter 6 Chapter 7 Chapter 8 Chapter 9 Chapter X Chapter 11 Chapter 12 Chapter 13 Chapter 14 Chapter 15 Chapter 16 Chapter 17 Chapter 18 Chapter 19 Chapter XX Chapter XXI Chapter XXII Chapter XXIII Chapter XXIV Chapter XXV Chapter XXVI Chapter XXVII Chapter XXVIII Chapter XXIX Chapter XXX Chapter XXXI Chapter XXXII Chapter XXXIII The full Project Gutenberg license.